Were you amazed that the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, publicly praised President Joseph Boakai for his eloquence in English during a recent visit to Washington? He said, "You speak better English than many of us over here." The crowd chuckled, cameras flashed. But beneath that compliment lies a deeper story, a tale that stretches back over 200 years, soaked in struggle, pride, betrayal, and finally, a cry for inclusion. So, how did Liberia, a nation founded by freed American slaves, become a place where its own indigenous people fought to be seen, heard, and counted in their own land? Sit back as we unravel the truth behind Liberia's independence beyond 1847 to the untold chapter that didn't arrive until 1964, when all Liberians, not just a few, were finally allowed to vote, access education, and truly belong. In 1822, under the wings of the American Colonization Society, ACS, freed black slaves were resettled to West Africa. They named the land Liberia, meaning land of the free. But for the Pele, Bassa, Kru, Vai, Mandingo, Gbandi, Lorma, and other native tribes, freedom was never something granted. The settlers, later known as Americo-Liberians, brought with them the customs, religion, dress, and politics of America. And while they built churches, schools, and declared a republic in 1847, the indigenous people, the rightful landowners, remained marginalized. The Constitution of Liberia, modeled after that of the U.S., spoke of liberty and justice. But that liberty only extended to the settler elite. For over a century, natives couldn't vote, hold key offices, or attend elite schools. They were taxed, conscripted into labor, and called uncivilized. Some were even forced into labor on foreign plantations, a scandal so deep it made headlines in the League of Nations in the 1930s. The Americo-Liberians controlled everything, from Monrovia's government mansions to the inland checkpoints. The vast majority of Liberians lived in the bush, under tribal chiefs, forgotten by their own republic. While the settlers built along the coast, they ignored the vast interior, believing it was enough to hold coastal towns and issue proclamations. But France had other plans. From the north and east, French colonial forces expanded, claiming parts of what is now Ivory Coast, Guinea, and Mali. Liberia's indigenous people, especially the Lorma, Gbandi, and Mandingo, lived deep in these regions. But because the Liberian government made no administrative or military presence inland, France claimed these lands as unoccupied. Liberia lost tens of thousands of square miles of territory between the 1880s and early 1900s, lands that belonged to tribes who had no voice in Monrovia. Liberia failed to protect her own because she refused to recognize them as her own. In 1862, Liberia's elite founded Liberia College, which later became the University of Liberia, one of the oldest higher learning institutions in West Africa. But education was for the few. Entry was reserved for settler families, the wealthy, and the well-connected. Indigenous children were excluded. Most of them lived far from Monrovia and lacked access to roads, books, and classrooms. The language of instruction, English, was foreign to them. And so was the idea that they could ever become doctors, lawyers, or presidents. Yet, hunger for knowledge burned in the hearts of many. Boys walked barefoot from Bong and Lofa to mission schools in Gbarnga and Buchanan. Girls studied by firelight, dreaming of classrooms they were told were not theirs. Education became the quiet battlefield of Liberia's real freedom struggle. As Liberia expanded its control inland, roads had to be built to connect the interior to the capital. But these roads were paved with pain. Thousands of young indigenous men were rounded up and forced into labor, carrying tools, clearing forest, and breaking stone with bare hands. They slept in tents, ate scraps, and worked in rain or heat. Many died or returned broken. These men were not criminals. They were farmers, hunters, sons, and brothers. But because they lacked education, they had no protection. Only those in school were exempt. But schools were scarce. Most indigenous villages had none. This made education more than just a privilege. It became a shield, a way to escape suffering. Yet it remained out of reach for most. So, while others studied in Monrovia's classrooms, their peers built the very roads they would one day drive on. Despite the chains of exclusion, resistance brewed. Elders demanded schools. Chiefs pushed for justice. In 1944, a wind of change came with President William V.S. Tubman. Though he too was Americo-Liberian, he saw that a house divided could not stand. Tubman launched the unification policy, a bold attempt to bridge the gap between settlers and natives. Roads were built to the interior. Chiefs were given recognition. Rural schools began to open, and scholarships slowly became available for tribal students. But it was not until 1964, 117 years after independence, that native Liberians were finally granted universal suffrage, the right to vote and be voted for. Until 1964, that Liberia could truly claim to be a democracy for all its people. Tubman expanded suffrage to include all adult citizens regardless of tribe or property. That year, in Nimba County, a 55-year-old woman named Kula, who had never been counted in any census or government decision, walked barefoot to a polling station. She had never voted, never seen a ballot. Yet her fingerprint marked a turning point in the nation's history. In Grand Geda, young men who had once feared soldiers now campaigned openly. For the first time, political candidates visited interior towns and spoke in tribal dialects. Women danced around ballot boxes in celebration. That same year, Liberia welcomed its first indigenous representatives into the national legislature. Among the pioneers were Chief Tamba Taylor, a respected traditional leader from Lofa County, Madam Ellen Sandimani, a voice for women from Gbafla County, Chief Blamo Nelson, a strong advocate for native inclusion. This moment also recognized the contributions of earlier indigenous leaders such as Paramount Chief Flomo Togba, Chief Gbafla. Though not always in official positions, they had long served as mediators between the tribal interior and the settler elite, paving the way for political representation. These trailblazers stood not only as lawmakers but as cultural bridges, bringing the voices of the forest, the village, and the ancestral drums into Liberia's legislative halls. The moment was quiet in international circles, but it thundered in the heart of every indigenous man and woman. 64. Under Tubman's presidency, marks Liberia's true independence, the birth of inclusion. For the first time, the Gola boy in Grand Cape Mount could dream of becoming a lawmaker. the Lorma girl from Zorzor could one day become a minister. It was the beginning of a long journey, but a journey now shared by all Liberians, not just a privileged few. Indigenous students began entering the University of Liberia, not as guests, but as equals. They studied law, medicine, and public administration. No longer to serve, but to lead. From classrooms once closed to them, they emerged as the new architects of Liberia's future. Independence is never won alone. Liberia's journey was paved by heroes, some celebrated, some forgotten, but all essential. Chief Suah Koko, the powerful female warrior of Bong County, stood not just for tribal pride, but for dialogue. She opened her land to education and cooperation, becoming a bridge between the settlers and the tribes. Didhu Weletwe, a bold voice from Grand Bassa, dared to speak against the oppression of native people in the 1920s and 30s. For that, he was exiled, but never silenced. Edward J. Barclay, although an Americo-Liberian, defended Liberia's sovereignty during the forced labor crisis of the 1930s. President William V.S. Tubman, through his unification policy and suffrage reform, tore down the walls of exclusion. And then there were the unnamed heroes, teachers in thatched huts, chiefs who resisted colonial land grabs, students who crossed rivers barefoot to attend school, mothers who prayed over but their children's books at night. These were not presidents or generals, but they were nation builders all the same. History is not only kept in books or politics, it lives in the voice of the griot, the rhythm of the drum, the echo of a folk tale told by firelight. Through decades of silence and exclusion, it was our oral historians, drummers, praise singers, and village elders who kept the truth alive. When no school would admit our children, the griots taught them who they were. When history books erased native names, the storytellers etched our legacy in the hearts of the people. Heroes like elders who recited ancestral lines by heart, women who passed down wisdom through lullabies and proverbs, musicians who sang of unity and resistance, writers like Baiti Moore, whose words preserve culture, radio journalists, educators, and school teachers who told the whole story. Without them, Liberia's soul might have been forgotten, even as flags were raised. As President Joseph Boakai stands on global stages, praised not just for his English but for his vision, he carries within him the legacy of the silent warriors, the farmers, the chiefs, the barefoot children, and the unlettered elders who cried, prayed, and fought for equal rights. Boakai himself is a product of that fight. Born in Warsonga, Lofa County, he walked miles to attend school, graduated from the University of Liberia, and served in government for decades. His journey proves that Liberia's promise was never just for those who arrived on ships, but for those who held this land in trust for centuries. Liberia's independence didn't begin in 1847. It began in the hearts of those who never gave up. It came alive in the polling booths of 1964, in the rural classrooms of Ganta and Sanikeli, in the lecture halls of the University of Liberia, when the children of chiefs sat beside the sons of settlers. That is the Liberia worth celebrating. A Liberia for all. A Liberia reborn in truth, unity, and inclusion. Thank you for taking this journey through Liberia's true story of independence. We hope it gave you deeper insight into our nation's past. Not just the flags and dates, but the real voices, struggles, and triumphs of our people. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What did you learn from Liberia's long walk to inclusion? Were you inspired by the strength of our indigenous heroes? What does freedom mean to you today? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, just like the voices that fought to be heard for over a century. Don't forget to like, share, and follow us for more Liberian stories, history, and cultural pride. Together, we keep our history alive. This is Liberia. This is our truth.